Historically, and in many communities throughout the world, law enforcement has become the default crisis response system. With little to no actual community crisis response structure, law enforcement was forced to find ways to take on this responsibility. The Crisis Intervention Team, CIT program, was developed to address the issues of law enforcement's response.
When we met in 1988, we did not know that we were about to undertake our life's work. Community members had come to the city of Memphis and our police department with a problem. People with mental illness and crisis were being traumatized in police custody and sometimes even dying. The community, in the form of the local NAMI affiliate, had already proposed a solution. A community task force to examine training for police officers on keeping people with mental illness and officers themselves safe during a mental health crisis event. Memphis ended up developing the Crisis Intervention Team.
Over the past 30 years, CIT has become a movement of change. Thousands of communities have been inspired to make their crisis response systems safer and help people on the path to recovery. Countless law enforcement officers and mental health professionals have joined the fight for mental health recovery. In 2005, local and state CIT leaders from across the United States came together to begin a formation of a national CIT organization. Representatives from Canada came to the meeting, so we changed the name to CIT International.
However, as the program spread throughout the world, adaptations of CIT may have stepped away from the basic core elements of crisis response services.
There will always be those times that law enforcement will have to be the initial response to a crisis situation. CIT assists law enforcement to navigate through their community's healthcare system when those incidents arise. Knowledge of and familiarity with their local behavioral health resources are critical and ensure that a person in crisis is linked to appropriate resources and services.
There's a growing body of research supporting the best practices of CIT programs. CIT can now be considered evidence-based for improving officers' knowledge, attitudes, confidence, and ability to effectively respond to mental health crises, and for increasing linkages to mental health care. These effects are strongest when programs adhere to the volunteer specialist element of the model.
Partnerships are essential to a successful CIT program, and a steering committee of those partnerships is the foundation. Once the executives of your mental health advocacy organizations, law enforcement agencies, and mental health agencies have agreed that CIT is the right path for your community, it's time to invite them to come together.
Many communities undergo a process called Sequential Intercept Model Mapping, SIM, which brings together stakeholders to discuss and diagram how people living with mental illness move in and out of the criminal justice system and the crisis response system. SIM mapping can bring clarity to the challenges you face and provide clear steps to improving your crisis response system. The mapping process produces a physical map of the systems and services involved when an individual is in crisis. It also produces a list of gaps and strengths in your system and recommendations for addressing systematic challenges.
It's great that law enforcement departments are so interested in working with their community partners to develop CIT programs. However, it's important to not lose sight of the fact that the first goal of CIT programs is to transform crisis response systems to minimize the times that law enforcement officers are the first responders to individuals in emotional distress.
Developing an effective crisis response system that reduces law enforcement contact and increases connection to mental health services for people in crisis is at the core of CIT programs. The crisis response system must be flexible to connect resources and services to the individual as their needs evolve and provide the services in the least intrusive manner.
CIT benefits mental health services.
CIT benefits family members of loved ones with mental illness.
CIT benefits those with lived experience.
CIT benefits law enforcement.
Ultimately, mental health care services' first and foremost interest is the care of the individual with mental illness. The earlier we can become involved with a person in crisis, generally, the better the outcomes. Additionally, if we can resolve a crisis in the least intrusive way, the better the outcomes. Why would we not want to try to resolve a crisis situation through a crisis line or treat the individual right in the community if we can? CIT builds the infrastructure to do just that.
As a family member, you just want to see your loved one get the help they need. You want them to not struggle with their symptoms. And the last thing you want to do is to have to call the police on your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, or the family member. We need an alternative throughout the entire world where we can get our loved one the help they need without involving the criminal justice system, which includes law enforcement. CIT helps find those alternatives.
We must remember people in crisis are already experiencing a level of confusion and fear. We need to make sure that we do not have a crisis response system that says help comes in a police vehicle.
Law enforcement has a crucial role in a crisis response system, but it should not be the crisis response system. We need to be a support to mental health services when warranted and let the mental health care system take responsibility. We need to help build a crisis response system where communities first reach out to mental health care services and only to law enforcement services when needed. CIT can help make this a reality.
CIT International offers a resource to communities that are wanting to develop or sustain the CIT program. Visit citinternational.org and download or order Crisis Intervention Team Programs, a best practice guide for transforming community responses to mental health crises if your community is interested in the best practices of CIT.